Okay. All right. I would like to call this King City Planning Commission meeting to order at 9:30. First order of business is roll call. Mike, if you could do that for us, please.
Yeah, hang on. Ronnie, will you send Carl a link to the meeting, please?
Yes.
All right, thanks. Let's go. Commissioner Paulson.
Here.
Commissioner Casanova is not here yet. Commissioner Walters.
Here.
Commissioner Bellows.
Here.
Commissioner Manellis. Not here. And then Chair Petrie.
Here.
Joe just got on.
So that gives us 4 of 6. 5 of 6. Joe, I've got you in.
Good.
All right.
Okay, great. All right, folks, let's proceed with the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the April 28th meeting. Have all the commissioners had a chance to take a look at those minutes? Are there any questions, concerns, or corrections needed? I don't see anyone indicating that, so I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the April 28th meeting.
I'll provide that motion to approve the April 20th.
Okay,
I'll
motion by Annie. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by John. Any more discussion? Great. All right, let's go to a vote. Just raise your hand if you are yes on this motion.
Oh,
We
Joe,
got 4. Joe, can you hear?
Joe, can you hear us?
I don't think you can hear us.
I can't see everybody. Okay,
I've got 4 with Joe abstaining.
all right. Are there any objections to this? I'm not seeing any objections. All right, motion passes. Next order of business is the first item is the transportation system plan. Who's going to be doing that, Mike?
Carl is, but he's just now logging in. We had to send him an invite really quick. Mark, I've got Mark Manellis logging in now. So Mark, I've got you in as well. So we have 6. Joe, can you hear us yet? Joe, can you hear? I'll do the chat. Can you send him a chat? Yeah,
Yeah, already.
I think he's having trouble hearing. No.
Okay, so we're just waiting for Carl to log in then, okay, or get ready to go.
He's logged in now.
Okay,
We lost Joe, but hopefully he's going to log back in and
okay, great.
going.
And Mark, I see you. I'll mark you here.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry, I was late. It wouldn't. Was having some computer internet issues. It keeps dropping. My internet keeps dropping this morning. I don't know why.
All right, it's Wednesday clean day around here, so everything's cleaned up.
Oh, Jeff Roberts.
Okay, I see Carl, so good to go.
Yep, and here comes Joe now.
Perfect.
Joe, can you hear us now?
Joe, can you hear us?
Can't
No.
hear us.
Uh,
All right. Well, I guess Joe's just going to have technical difficulties. We'll go to the chat. Maybe tell him to look at the chat window and we can go from there.
Okay, great. All right, so we are ready for Carl. Go ahead, Carl.
Whoops. Hang on.
Momentito. Hopefully you see a slide with King City TSP on it.
Yeah.
All right, we're in the right place then. You're not seeing my calendar. That's good. So I'm just going to walk you through where we are at this point in the TSP process and get your feedback on a few key issues. A little bit about where we're at, work completed to date, and the decisions ahead between now and the end of our contract, which is coming up really quick at this point. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what a TSP is, a transportation system plan, it's really about building on the city's goals and values and figuring out how to construct a transportation system, a multimodal transportation system that works towards those values. And that could take lots of shapes. As you'll see when the plan is put together, we have networks for all different travel modes, and we're trying to integrate those as best we can with the land use plan that's envisioned. So when we're all done, you're going to have policies, facility guidelines, performance measures that help you implement facilities in the growth area, but also give you guidelines for any kind of improvements you want to make within the existing city. So it'll achieve both ends of that spectrum and give you some ideas about funding and the funding that's needed to make it all happen, and some priorities to getting the system implemented. This is the schedule. At this point, it should look familiar. Our window of opportunity ends at the end of June under the current ODOT contract. So by that point, you're not going to be asked to approve the plan, but our contract will deliver a plan that's ready to advance into the adoption process. So it's not like you need to make a decision in the next 30 days. That'll continue after this point. One of the key public events that's left in our contract is a tabling event. I believe, Mike, that's coming up in a couple weeks. I think the 9th is the date, right?
Yep, just heard today that we're going with June 9th. So the 9th at 4 o'clock, 4 to 6, right?
That sounds right. So a tabling event is where you can come in person and talk and see and give feedback. And it's an opportunity to have, you know, kind of a focused conversation as opposed to try to do it, you know, online or fill out a form or that kind of thing. For these kinds of processes, it's a good option for outreach to the community. So the next few slides is really about growth. And if you were around here for the first time I did this presentation back in November, this should look familiar. This is the numbers that are envisioned for the greater King City area, including the growth area, the Kingston Terrace area. So the numbers on the screen reflect the total units that the community is expected to have in the next few decades. So that's one side of the equation. So the process that we go through certainly considers the growth expected within the greater King City planning boundary, but it also considers, well, this is the map that illustrates that. This is the left. This is from the concept plan work that was done, I think, a year and a half ago by now. But outside of your fine borders, there's lots of other communities doing the same kind of long-range planning. And this is a snapshot really of not that big of area of Washington County. So you've got what I call the greater Roy Rogers Road corridor, where you've got Cooper Mountain, River Terrace, of course, Kingston Terrace, Sherwood West, Tonkin, and North Wilsonville. If you tally the residential units up in all those areas, you've got about 14,000 households, which equates to a city about the size of Tigard, roughly speaking. You know, so you're going to drop a new Tigard on this part of, you know, the county. And as transportation planners, our job is to help the county and help the local agencies figure out how to best serve the traveling needs that come along with that. So as a guy, personal insight, I live not too far from here, so this is kind of rock my world as well as your world. It's interesting times to be in this part of Washington County. So one of the things we touched on briefly the last time I made a presentation was the vision, goals, and objectives. And I think maybe we presented, I'm going to present kind of an overview of that in the slides, but there's also a memo that's available, I hope, to you. I think Ronnie Smith was going to make that available to you to look at kind of offline. So if you have any comments or feedbacks, you can be sure to loop back and tell staff how you feel about that. But so the diagram on the right kind of shows the progression is kind of a cascading thing between visions, goals, objectives, and performance measures. And that is the name of the game in today's long-range planning environment. Performance-based planning is our attempt to quantify how your investments are working towards meeting those objectives, goals, and visions. You work back up the ladder by doing an assessment of how well and your investments align with your own community values. So I'm not going to read the vision statement to you. You have that available to you to read in your own time, but that kind of sets the tone for the overall construct of this framework. So the first few objectives here, these aren't, by the way, these are not in priority order. If you're wondering why, they're configured the way they are, it's not about priorities. It's just about this is the sequence they're in. So we have accessibility and connectivity. So it's comfort and convenience for getting around town in whatever mode you choose. This isn't auto specific. So this includes any kind of mode for getting around. Safety and security, health, and protecting the environment, the natural environment, which there is plenty of in the Kingston Terrace area, that needs to be taken into account as those land use plans and the transportation systems are envisioned. I'm hoping you can't hear my whining dog next to me. Maybe you can. I apologize for that. I don't know what's going on with the dog, and I'm really not in a good position to fix it, but just thought I'd let you know that it's not me. I'm not whining in a separate voice. It's the dog. Welcome to working from home. So on to the next goals and objectives. Equity in terms of addressing disparities in the different groups within the community. There's historically speaking, there's opportunity for that to occur, and that's something that going forward the community wants to recognize and try to overcome. A couple other issues there noted: fiscal responsibility. It's always good to make wise strategic investments to minimize the investment and get the maximum return. I think the last one is collaboration, which is important, especially because you're relying on your kind of partner agencies, in this case, primarily Washington County. They're the ones that are in charge of Beef Bend Road, and they're in charge of Roy Rogers Road, which both of those facilities have some influence over the growth area on the west side. So this map is a little different than what you had in your packet. So Mike and I talked about this, and these are alignments that we're looking at for an east-west collector road. We typically call this variations of Fisher Road extensions. So we've got A, B, C, and D here, but they all begin at the western end of the existing Fisher Road and continue into the Kingston Terrace area and terminate over at Roy Rogers Road. We would all expect that new intersection would be controlled by a traffic signal, given the volume of activity that you would see there. But the alignment and choices about how to connect to the community and navigate the terrain and navigate the environmental issues is kind of the trade-offs to be had in looking at those different options, A, B, C, and D. It's also a matter of how much private property you're impacting, how much you're utilizing, available right away, because that has significant trade-offs in terms of cost implications. So all those factors are being considered, as well as the attractiveness of these routes for serving their intended use: walking, biking, getting between what you could call the new side of King City and the existing side of King City, how to facilitate those kinds of connections.
And if I could just interject really quick, Carl, I mean, the map that you guys provided is great. It shows the road network going east-west, and I think those roads will definitely be there and be used in the future. The question is, at what level of service do those roads provide? So
Right.
I think when we look at alternatives to Fisher, we really need to figure out how we can get from point A to point B from Fisher in a logical manner. So these provide some alternatives that we can evaluate and look at.
Right. Okay. Let's see. So the other thing that was in your packet is just a taste of where the plan is going. So this map there's a lot of information on here. So each one of those dots and each one of those numbers identify capital projects that'll be on a list to build the street network. And we're going to have a description of, what the street should look like, what the cross section should look like, and estimated cost to construct. So each one of those, it's either if it's a dashed line, it's a new street. If it's in a solid line, it's an upgrade to an existing street. So some of the connections that are further to the east, those are not necessarily widening streets, but they could be changing the facilities that are on the street. So I think like 15 and 16 that are winding up to the north east corner of the city there, those are bike facility kinds of improvements as opposed to roadway improvements. So you're just kind of strengthening the quality of the bike route through that area. That is not suggesting we're doing road widening in that area, just to be clear. Whereas Beef Bend, there's significant improvements to be done. Same thing on Roy Rogers. And Elsner, pretty much anything to the west of 137th is mostly new construction, as you might imagine. So this is the kind of the framework for laying out the list of capital projects. We'll provide, like I said, we'll provide that information. We have it sliced into the different modes of travel. We have the vehicle network. So this is a breakdown by the same kind of scheme where you've got the primary routes east-west for the collectors. And so you can see the Fisher Road extension. You can see an upgrade of Elsner, a few other things on here, but it also highlights the kinds of traffic controls we might expect at the intersections to make it work. Similar kinds of treatment for the pedestrian network. So it might seem a little bit confusing here on the right, but that's showing you where you have existing sidewalks. So we have an inventory of that information. So we're showing that on the right side of the map, and on the left side of the map is showing where we're going to continue that sidewalk, the convenient walking system, whether it be on a sidewalk on a traditional street, or it could be a separated shared use path or multi-purpose facility that's off the road. They're not all adjacent, directly adjacent to travel lanes. Similar kind of treatment here for the bike network. So we're consciously designing higher quality bike facilities within the city to provide, again, safe and convenient. So not just the elite cyclists will want to jump on their bike and go do their thing, but anyone at any level can feel comfortable doing that as well. So we have kind of a hierarchy there shown between cases where the bikes share the streets and where they have separate lanes, and where they have actually a separated facility that they can ride on that's not going to be immediately adjacent to vehicle travel lanes. So the other things that I don't have pictures for, well, we did have the pedestrian network. We also have a transit network. So we have concepts about how some kind of local circulator transit vehicle could be provided and routes that that might take. And then we have other information that'll be helpful when it comes down to reviewing and approving development applications, street and pathway spacing, access management spacing. That's all important information for guiding staff decisions. And then of course the planning commission decisions. When you have development applications before you, the question will be, are the streets laid out in a reasonable spacing, a convenient pattern for getting around, consistent with what you envision in the TSP? That's the question that's going to be asked. Here's a few illustrations. These are excerpts from the work that's done to date. So this would be one potential cross section for Fisher Road near Roy Rogers Road, so the very west end of it. So you can see here you've got one travel lane in the middle going in each direction. You have on-street parking, you have landscape strips. So I'm going from inside to outside. And then you've got separated bikeways and separated walking ways. So, you can ride your bike conveniently down the corridor, but you're not going to get in the way of vehicles, and you're not going to be on street worrying about whether somebody who's parked their car is going to open their door or not. So it provides you a fair level of freedom and protection for that reason. If you're moving further to the east towards 137th, you can see the cross-section changes pretty dramatically. It's significantly more narrow, and you've also got the walking and biking on one side of the road only. So that's to take advantage of a narrower right-of-way, but also provide the same kind of functionality. So what's ahead of you, showing on this map, is we've got the TSP, which is a document that you're going to be seeing in the not too distant future for adoption. That's under development right now. Where some decisions ahead on some of the things, such as the Fisher Road extension, which alignment is preferred, that needs to be made, and then also the funding decisions ahead need to be made. When I first presented last time, we had this steps ahead, and we've knocked out the first few of those, and the last one we have to do is to sort out the funding options and prepare a TSP document. So that's what I had for an overview. Let me pause and answer any questions y'all might have at this stage, knowing what you know. I'm happy to answer.
Okay, I have a question. I was wondering if I should raise my hand. Depends on who's doing the Zoom call. Hold on, let me. Okay, can you hear me okay? Am I muted? Okay. I have actually several questions. And the first one is, why does Fisher Road need to connect to Roy Rogers? It seems to me that we're trying to keep Fisher Road kind of limited in its amount of traffic, and that would just give us a nice little cut through.
Well, I mean, the normal rationale for laying out a street system is you want to provide parallel routes on a regular basis as best you can, given the shape of the land uses and the shape of the environmental issues you need to deal with. So if we don't have a parallel route like Fisher Road, decisions to travel east-west they become all limited to Beef Bend Road, right? So you're pushing all the local traffic that wants to go, not just as a through route, but say someone has bought a new house in Kingston Terrace and they want to go south on I-5.
Okay.
So they would have to, all of them would have to go up to Beef Bend and all the way to Highway 99, then turn right, and then head south on 99 and then work their way over to Durham Road and that kind of a thing. So this gives them a choice to go that way or to do something more local, depending on the time of day and when they want to do that. It's an alternative route. So the part of our theory in doing transportation network planning is to give people many choices. The more restrictive we are in terms of connectivity, the more overloaded certain routes are the more difficult it is to get around a community, and not just in a car, but for walking and biking in particular. It becomes a much more difficult challenge for people to get around the community when you tend to shape the network without lots of parallel routes.
Well,
Carol, perhaps you weren't around when we were doing the concept plan, but we had initially looked at this area and decided to build on a grid. So the reason for the grid is that it disperses the traffic. I mean, you know this, you're a planner, so you understand that transportation planning in general, the more relief valves you have, the less impact, less bottlenecking that you see on the major arterials. So when we looked at it from a regional standpoint on what we needed in order to accommodate our impacts on the area, then we needed to build on a grid. So that's why we have east-west collectors like Capulet. That's why Fisher's there. That's why we have a road going east-west about every 600 feet.
yeah, I know, I understand that. And I'm not saying eliminate Fisher Road in any way. I'm saying maybe have it at, end at the central, our CBC,
Okay.
or CBD. And the reason is that, I mean, I'm from bigger cities, and cut-throughs are like the, what I do. And so it brings traffic into King City. God, do I sound horrible? It brings traffic into King City, maybe that we don't want those. We don't want people cutting through King City. We want them on Beef Bend. And if you live in Kingston Terrace, you can be taking Fisher Road without any big problem, because you're in the city at that point. Hold on. That's all I'm saying, is just that connection. And it would make sense that even the county would not want that many access points off of Roy Rogers, since Roy Rogers is 55 miles per hour, but will be changed, as God only knows.
Right.
But I think that it's important to keep Fisher Road local. I think that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay, so
Can I add one thing? So
Yeah.
a couple of things. One is we have been working with the county to lay out the network consistent with their guidelines. So we're not proposing anything that departs from their spacing guidelines. They've seen these networks. They're okay with them as they are. So we're not introducing more connections than they would find acceptable. The other point I would make is that the key issue for Fisher Road, any kind of extension for Fisher Road, is how you design that extension. What is that going to look like compared to the other choices in the system? So Beef Bend Road is going to be a much more traditional county arterial facility that people are comfortable riding, because it's pretty well very auto oriented for the most part. Whereas Fisher Road, as you saw, I showed a couple different cross sections.
yeah.
Some of them are quite narrow. 10-foot lanes is a narrow kind of roadway. And so it's going to feel more constricted, kind of a little bit more uncomfortable for people who don't live in the community to go through. And that's intentional, right? I mean, you're trying to make it more of a community road than a thoroughfare. So that's an issue that is being considered as we're thinking about this, to avoid the issue that you're mentioning.
Yeah, it's not a straight line, Fisher Road's not a straight line cutting straight
No,
across.
I
It's
realize that.
meandering through, and it's going to go around these neighborhoods, and it's going to provide access to parks along the river and trails and things of that nature, and probably be going through communities. And I think that's why the dynamic of the road changes at different junctures. Like the dynamic of Fisher Road between Elsner and Roy Rogers is going to be different than the dynamic of Fisher Road between Elsner and 150th and 150th and 147th and 147th over to 137th. The dynamic of the road changes throughout that whole cycle, with outlets to get people up to Beef Bend and hit the arterial. So
Right,
like,
yeah.
it's in how we design it. That's going to be the impact of the road. We don't have to make a 5-lane thoroughfare and have everyone cut through Fisher Road. We can also control those speeds. Like we can put a 25-mile-an-hour speed on Fisher. It doesn't have to be a intrusive element of our infrastructure. It just needs to be there to provide the connections that we need in order to get people in and out.
Yeah, well, I cut through King City every time I go to grocery outlet. And, maybe the people who live there would prefer I didn't. And that's all I'm talking about. I will turn on Fisher Road and go that way rather than Beef Bend. And it would be better not to have me do that. And so I'm just, it's just something to consider, having it, having a dead end before it reaches Roy Rogers.
Well, here's my issue with dead ends though, Carol, is that
Okay.
you get everybody in the city paying for that road and only a couple people get to use it.
Okay.
So dead ends don't help anybody except the people living at the end of the dead end.
Okay. All right. Do we have a bus network with the transportation plan?
We were
Right,
talking
I
about doing an autonomous loop, but Carl, talk about transit with TriMet. So,
Well, they haven't committed to it yet, but we're expecting that TriMet will eventually provide route service on Roy Rogers Road. And so we're trying to orient the street system to be ready for that, basically. So people can get on a bus at somewhere in the vicinity of Fisher Road and Roy Rogers, because that would be a logical place to have a stop, I would think. But also, as Mike mentioned, we're looking for opportunities for kind of an internal King City autonomous vehicle kind of transit loop to get people around. So it'd be a relatively slow moving vehicle, right? If it's autonomous, they go like 20 miles an hour. They're pretty low speed. So we're making provisions for that as well. I think those are the two main points, other than the existing service on 99.
Okay. One of the reasons I ask, okay, so is this this is a transportation plan for all of King City, not just Kingston Terrace, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Because right now, if I want to get to the other side of Durham, I have to take a bus all the way up to the Tiger Transit Center and then over to the other side. There is no service down Durham for people of King City. So people of King City can't even go to Bridgeport
Right.
Shopping center. And what I'm really concerned about is that if I were living in Kingston Terrace, I'd have to get myself out to Roy Rogers, take the bus all the way up to Roy Rogers, maybe to what is up there, Shoals Ferry.
Shoals Ferry.
And then over Shoals Ferry, if I just want to go to Bridgeport.
Yeah.
And so getting an east-west all the way from Roy Rogers all the way over to I-5, I think is going to be important. I mean, and then you can take something up I-5. Well, it's just right now a reason why nobody I know takes any buses.
So Keith or Carl, you guys could probably chime in as well, but I believe our town center plan calls for a potential transit stop in the King City Plaza area there. And then TriMet's talking about an extension line that would go down Durham and tie into the Southwest Corridor near the railroad line down there. And that would give you your east-west connection as well as a transit hub within the town center of King City. At least that's what I'd seen a couple years ago. I don't think that's changed at all, but I think that's their long-term vision.
Okay.
Keith, Carl, you guys might know more.
Well, TriMet did a service enhancement plan. They did a series of them for the metro area, and at least here, it talks about a future bus line on Durham. Carl would know more about this than I do, but I believe that service enhancement plan was all done before these urban expansion areas came to be. So it could be that TriMet really needs to revisit their service enhancement plan and talk more about east-west connection. We had some preliminary discussion with TriMet about, because they were looking for this Durham route, it would end at 99W, and they were looking for a way to turn the buses around and go back. And so there was discussion about having a stop and maybe even a layover space in the existing town center that TriMet could use. But that's about as far as it went. And we really didn't talk about east-west connection, say on Beef Bend or Roy Rogers Road or anything like that, because we hadn't gotten that far. This is when we did the town center plan more around 2015. So anyway, probably we'll just need more conversation with TriMet, and maybe Carl's been having that conversation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So kind of like going off of the TriMet plan, you know, when we first started in the concept plan, our thought is that we could run an autonomous loop from that hub in the King City Plaza, like down to Fisher, down Fisher over to the new town center, and then back up to Beef Bend and follow Beef Bend back to like 116th, and then down 116th back into the town center to refresh. And we thought that that would be the perfect situation for one of those little autonomous cars that carries like 2 to 4 people, right? So it's like a little, I wish I had that picture that Carl sent me of this little autonomous vehicle. It travels about 20 to 25 miles an hour. It's electric, it follows on, it does its own thing. And you can fit, I think it was up to 6 people in this little vehicle.
Right.
And it was really kind of a nifty idea. And we've been talking with PGE and others about how we would try to implement this and what kind of infrastructure would be necessary to basically support this kind of autonomous loop. So just trying to make sure as we build to the future, we're thinking about what kind of future needs that we're going to need.
Okay, other questions? Good discussion.
Oh, just one quick follow-up comment on the using the town center as a turnaround. When we had those discussions with TriMet, we talked to the owner at the time of the shopping center, and they supported the idea. The property has since been sold to another larger corporation that owns a number of different shopping centers. They came around about 1.5 years ago, kicking the tires, asking us about, well, what might we be able to do with the new zoning for the town center? They're expressing an interest in doing some more mixed use, maybe even some retirement residence type of facilities. We talked to them, we told them about the idea of using this as a turnaround and so forth, and they seemed to have a fairly positive reaction. Certainly didn't express any heartburn about having a bus route going through that area. Obviously with COVID and retail being turned on its head right now, I don't have any idea what they're thinking, but at least the previous owner and the current owner don't seem to have any serious objection to the idea.
Are there any more questions for Carl?
Yeah, just kind of going back to Fisher and Roy Rogers. Do we know what that connector will look like, where Fisher feeds into Roy Rogers? Stoplight, stop sign. I know it's a county road, so it'd be a lot of.
Yeah, my expectation, given that that's an important east-west connection street, especially given that it serves, you know, kind of the town center realm of the Kingston Terrace, I would expect that to be a signal. When things develop to the extent that a signal makes sense, but ultimately I think that would be a signal, because the spacing is fine between where that is and Beef Bend Road. So you could have a signal at both locations and be consistent with county guidelines.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of something to make it inconvenient for, like, we're kind of trying to talk about cut through traffic through there if there's a way, but probably not.
Yeah, every community has that challenge about keeping those other cars out of their community, and it's a real deal, right? I mean, it feels like an inconvenience to the community to do that. You're right, but I haven't found any effective way to scare them away. Although I will say that. You know, I would say that the concept plan vision of the varying cross sections on Fisher Road is probably the most aggressive I've seen in terms of grappling with that. Because normally you just pick a cross section and you run with it through the whole length, right? So it's kind of reliable, convenient. It all looks the same, but that's not what we're doing in Kingston Terrace. We're necking it down in places where you have more sensitive areas, you have more limited right of way. So it's going to be a very different experience than normal, and I think that can influence people to pick other ways, right?
Yeah, I guess keep it slow like Fisher currently is at 25.
Yeah, and I think we have a number of roundabouts identified throughout the way. So
We do.
there's roundabouts, there's street designs. It's not a straight shot, it's
Like, are we remind me, are we considering to do like 131st with the medium in there?
for
Or
fishing.
trees? Yeah, for Fisher, making
Um,
it smaller.
No, I think it kind of is kind of designed like what Fisher
Currently.
water is kind of,
Okay.
but then it narrows down through the center right there, and then it eventually, gets a little bit wider, and eventually gets into the town center area where it's made for the market retail area in that area. So there's only that one segment really between Roy Rogers and Elsner, where it's like a big inviting streetscape with lots of pedestrian and bicycle facilities on it, parking, on-street parking, those sort of things. And then it gets necked down and it gets necked down again. And then as it gets into Edgewater, it goes to where it is in Edgewater. And then as it gets out of Edgewater, it goes to where it is between 131st and 99W. So it's like Carl was saying, it's practice in many different cross sections throughout that area. And the idea is and you're also going to have a local street network as well. So throughout all these areas, you're going to go into a traffic circle. There's going to be multiple options on which ways you go. If you continue on, and you're going to wind around and go to the next traffic circle, sort of thing. So.
All right, anything else?
Any other questions for Carl, folks?
Am I unmuted now? Okay, so the question I have is that trail system that parallels the river.
Mhm.
And so with the environmentalists being so concerned about all the crossings of those 5 creeks, can we afford to put that trail system in? As the city of Tigard develops its side of Beef Bend, we're going to get so much more runoff from additional roofs and driveways and streets. It just seems like to me that it sounds good, it looks good. I don't know if anybody can afford putting a system like that in. Any comments?
I haven't looked at that and just limited to just the trail, but I can say that part of the process is to provide, a holistic view of the cost estimates for building the system, and then making decisions around how to allocate the funding for that. So to me, it's kind of the bigger question of how do we fund the improvements that are envisioned in this growth area, plus other improvements that are envisioned in the rest of the city. Going forward, that's going to be a piece of the TSP that you're going to see eventually, is how to tackle that. So I mean, it's a fair question because it can be expensive to go across those things. But I think as a community, you kind of need to think a bit bigger about the complete system that you need to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve. Right. And you have a great amenity there with the river. I mean, to not try to leverage that, I think would be a loss a bit. Mike?
Yeah. The other thing I would say, John, is after touring that site, there's a difference between a vehicle crossing and like a bike ped crossing, like these drainages are only like 5-6 feet across, if you're jumping across with a bike or a person walking. So the crossing for a bike ped is much easier and it's far less invasive than a road crossing. A road crossing has to be built up to grade. You have to put all the substructure in there in order to cross these things. Whereas a bike ped can go down the hill, have a narrow, small footprint to cross over the drainage, and then continue on at that elevation. And there's a large section from like basically Rivermead all the way down to the O'Halloran property that's basically about the same elevation as Cook Park is. So if you've been down to Cook Park, it's all right there. The river's right next to it. It's granted, it's still in the floodplain, you know, but it's high and dry 99% of the time. So.
Oh, okay. I didn't understand that there wouldn't be bridges crossing all 5 of those creeks. So if you're just considering a path down the hill and across the creek, and you know, there's plenty of life preserver stock there, then I guess we're okay.
I would think you might have a culvert. You know, you might have somewhere for the water to go, but it doesn't have to be a full-on bridge structure.
I wanted to ask, what happened to the funding for, was it called the Tonkin Trail that came down the electrical path and down to the Tualatin River and over to Cook Park? I know that was in planning, 12 years ago or something. Has that just totally disappeared?
Are you talking?
West Side Trail segment
Yeah, thank you.
and the bridge across over to Heritage Pines. So we are working with regionally, South County, Wilsonville, Sherwood, ourselves, Tigard, Beaverton, essentially 5 of us who are connected by this north-south trail to get that going. That is part of the regional transportation system plan. And the West Side Trail segment currently kind of stops up on Bull Mountain and hasn't been quite completed all the way down. Our segment that goes through King City is the West Side Trail segment 4. And then on the south side, the Tonkin Trail is connected there through Tualatin and goes through Heritage Pines. And it's almost there. But we've been working and talking with Tualatin and Sherwood about how we can maybe apply for some FLAP funding, some federal fundings because of the connection to the wildlife reserve, the nature reserve there, and get that connected. So also Metro has their park bond, Parks and Trail bond that just recently went through, and how we could maybe utilize some of those funds to put those in action to help offset some of the FLAP fund matches, things of that nature. So it's still looming out there as this pie in the sky plan. We just haven't been able to put together the funding for it yet. Because I think mostly because of the cost of the bridge, the footbridge across the Tualatin River. But it's still out there.
Okay, folks, anything else before we move on to the next item? All right, are we ready to move on to the master plan update? Looks like we
Try to
are.
give a master plan update where we're at.
Oh, Mike.
Yeah,
gonna
thanks,
step
Carl. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Carl.
All right, bye.
So as the master plan progresses, we are going to do, did everyone get the email about the potential site tour on June 21st at 10 a.m.? Did everyone get that one? Okay, so Greg Russell and some of the folks out there in the Rivermead community have invited us back out. We did a tour previously, but we only had limited space. We could only take a couple people. So we put out just really small invites on, like we invited the mayor, who then declined. And then we offered the next person, worked our way down. until we thought we had one commissioner, one planning commissioner, and then at the last minute, neither one could go because of last minute stuff popping up. And so we did get Councilor Platt to come out and tour with us, but that was all we could really get. This is more open. We have more space now. We're not confined to one vehicle. So we should be able to get some more of you out there and involved this time around. Commissioner Bellis.
I was thinking that we might meet at the King City Center and carpool out. That just would eliminate cars.
Right. I think that's definitely an option. I think we're going to try to meet at the end of 137th. The other option is you can meet at the community park, the King City Community Park. There's a parking lot right there. It's a lot closer. You could just walk over from there if you wanted. But what happens though, I will tell you this, is that last time we started at the end of 137th there, or end of River Lane, and then we walked down through the Bankston property there, checked out that site, and then got back in our vehicles and rolled around to about 150th, the Meyer property, went down and met with Mike Myers and walked the lower portions of his property, and then came back up the backside of his property over to 147th and looked at that crossing at 147th. And then we all got back into our vehicles, went over to the O'Halloran property and down into the O'Halloran property, and then got back in, went all the way around to Elsner, and then got off at Elsner and checked out the final drainage over there and kind of walked all that stuff. So it took the better part of the day. I want to say it was probably a 3 to 4 hour tour when we were all said and done. You know, we can glean a lot of good information, kind of past practices on what's been happening out there with the farms and things of that nature, like learning that the farmers used to control the drainage through these tile systems, tile drainages. That was really enlightening for me. Kind of seeing one of the big ravines over by the O'Halloran property, kind of puts that in perspective. Seeing the old culvert across where the Fisher extension is proposed, seeing that old culvert and seeing how it got blown out, that's kind of brings into mind a lot of the environmental concerns of doing a culvert in that location. There's lots of good information kind of picked up along that tour, and I think it really puts things into perspective. I try to think with a 50-year vision, you know, on what it's going to look like in 20 years, what it's going to look like in 30 years, 40, 50 years, and try to figure out how we build a community around what we have and what's available. So I think if we can keep that long range vision of what King City is going to be in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and how we can utilize this area to its maximum potential and create a livable community and sustainable community. I think those are key features and key ideas to circulate through our minds as we look at all these things. So the tour is really helpful in that. Master plan, we'll probably try to team up with the TSP for that tabling event on June 9th. We have a presentation between the Metro Policy Analytical Committee, Analysis Committee tonight, 5. So things are just progression. There's not much to really share other than what Carl's kind of gone over with street networks. We're kind of like in a holding pattern until we kind of get those alternative analyses in from the TSP, which is happening in the next month or so. As Carl mentioned, they're coming up on the end of theirs toward the end of June. So we're expecting all that to come our way. And then from there, we can take off with the master planning pieces. But what we've been working on, you saw a little bit in there, what the streets look like, what the downtown core looks like, how we can meld our land uses together and formulate our development code to support those land uses. Keith, I know I'm summarizing here. Maybe there's more that you would like to add that I really haven't covered. It seems to me like we're kind of in the holding pattern, waiting for the TSP to provide those inputs so then we can move forward on what the cost analysis looks like, what our financial constraints are, and how we move forward. So I think that's where we're at master plan wise. Do you have anything to add, Keith?
The only other thing I'd like to point out is that we are coordinating with Tigard and Washington County, particularly on how the street systems will work. Also, as you folks know, Tigard is working on River Terrace South. They've finished a concept plan. So we're wanting to make sure that what we come up with for our town center, Main Street, will be supportive of what they're doing and vice versa. We've also been talking a little bit about how we locate the commercial or mixed use portion of that town center, because we're learning from our economic and market person that visibility is really important. So we're just trying to finesse, really talk about the land use, how that all it gets organized. And so we've been focused mostly at the town center area right now as to what types of things we might do. And we're having further discussion with Tigard and Washington County on those as well.
Yeah, I have another question. Once upon a time, I saw a plan set that showed the 5 creeks, and it showed a road between each creek going up to Beef Bend, and there was no straight through with Fisher Road. What happened to that option? Got cut off?
It didn't cut the mustard, so to speak. So you can't plan like that. You can't build a community like that. So that got thrown out pretty early in our concept analysis. And basically we went away from the node version to a more connected grid version.
Okay.
Essentially funneling all the traffic onto Beef Bend, through Beef Bend into a bit of turmoil. We'd have to buy right away on the north and south side of Beef Bend from 99W all the way down to 150th. We'd have to condemn all those properties on the north and south side and expand Beef Bend to 5 lanes. So that didn't work. So we were like, well, then we need to build on a grid so we don't have to do that. Plus, if you have Beef Bend turn into a 99W, it creates a huge divide between the neighborhoods. So that was rejected for a number of reasons.
Okay.
I'd also like to add that one of the things we wanted to do is have connected neighborhoods that make a community. And then if each neighborhood has only its access up to Beef Bend and then they take off from there, it's just like they don't, they're not connected. They don't feel like they share anything together. You don't feel like you're part of a city. You just think you're part of this neighborhood, and then I just go off to work and to school, and I'm not part of King City. I just live here.
Exactly.
So that was another important piece.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay, anything else on this item, folks? All right, so is there one of you going to be doing any more conversation about the development code updates?
June 9th, did everyone?
Yeah.
We have a busy month coming up. Hopefully everyone's prepared. June 9th, we'll be doing a presentation with House Bill 2001-2003. This will be the first public hearing for the code amendments in regards to those requirements. We will need a vote from the Planning Commission at that point in time with a recommendation to the City Council by June 16th. So we're basically taking your recommendation, shipping it out the next day over to the City Council. So the City Council can hold their public hearing on June 16th. These are all code amendments to bring us in line with the House Bill 2001-2003. So we've submitted those to DLCD. Just in general, they've been apprised of where we're at throughout the process. Mayor Gibson.
A quick question. A resident asked me a question about ADUs, and the question was regarding the height that we could build an ADU. And I thought there was some conversation about 20 feet or 18 feet. Do we, Keith or Mike, do you remember what we ended up with in terms of the code for ADUs and the height?
I think it was that they had to be subordinate to the main domicile. So if the building height was 35 feet, then the ADU could only be 25 feet. I think the only time that we had changed that, Keith, I believe was the SF zone, where the maximum height is 25 feet, right? And didn't we say 18 feet was, or did we stick with 20? I can't remember.
I'll have to confess, I'm not remembering. I'm thinking that we had something where if you could meet the setbacks, you could be the same height as whatever's allowed in the zone. And if you were closer than that, it would be less. I can check to what we adopted and get back to you.
Okay,
on that. I can email you that answer.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We may also, depending on where we go with this, we may also, our consultant may also recommend that we slightly modify the ADU dimensional requirements to make sense with the rest of the package that we're looking at for housing. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. One other thing I'd like to point out about the hearings. So our requirement with the grant that we got from the state is that we at least hold our first hearings with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So we're not obligated to adopt something by the end of June, but we are obligated to at least hold the first hearing. So if the Planning Commission and or City Council decides we need a little more time to talk about this and consider some issues that maybe concern us, we certainly can. So we're under the gun to hold the hearings, but we're not under the gun to adopt anything. We don't even have to have anything adopted actually until this time next year. So we've got plenty of time to consider things should we want to. So just want to make sure everybody's clear on that.
Okay, Keith, thanks. And you can just send me a quick email when you figure that out, okay? Thanks.
Just to be clear, on June 9th, do we have two events, a tabling event and a public hearing event?
Yes, we do. We would have the Planning Commission public hearing in the morning, 9:30, same as this. And then we would have the tabling event that evening from 4 to 6.
Hey, Mike, I just have one comment. June 9th is my birthday, so you don't have to bake me a cake or get me one of those little things that go around my head, you know, like up a crown or anything. I appreciate you not doing that.
What about a sombrero? We could get a large sombrero for you.
Mike, where is the tabling event going to be?
At the King City Community Park.
Okay. Same as before, but just, yeah, okay, okay.
We had put together the postcard. We sent the postcard over to Minuteman. It was supposed to go out. Never did. We call them up on, I think it was like Monday or Tuesday, and we're going, hey, we haven't seen that postcard that we sent you last week. What's going on? And they're like, oh, sorry about that. So now we've redid the postcard and sent it back over, and we should be good to go this time. We're gonna see. It should have gone out already, right, Ronnie?
No, Jessica just sent me an email on the postcard this morning, I believe, and that is on my to-do list next.
All right, so it's going out
Today.
this Friday? When's that? You're muted.
Muted myself. I'm going to send it to Minuteman and request it to be sent out on Friday.
All right.
Or tomorrow, whatever they can do.
Okay, sounds good. Sorry, my light doesn't like it when I don't move.
All right, so let's see. Mike, did you have any more comments on this, or Keith, either one? Okay. Then I think we can move on. I think this probably covers staff reports. You guys have probably talked enough for your morning. Do any of the commissioners have any reports? Not seeing anyone. So at this point, I think we could probably look for a motion to adjourn. Does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
I motion.
Okay,
to
Carol,
adjourn.
Carol moves that we adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by John. So all commissioners, if you're in favor of the adjournment, you can just raise your hand. Can't see everyone, but I think Ronnie can.
I've got everyone so far. And then
Okay.
before we actually adjourn, I just wanted
Uh-huh.
to say hi to Jan down there in my Hollywood Squares bottom left. Jen has applied to Planning Commission, so hopefully we'll be able to interview her at the next council meeting and
Okay.
get some things
That
done. So thanks for
sounds
applying,
great.
Jen.
That sounds great. All right, then. Looks like we are unanimous in going for adjournment. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, everyone.
Adjournment 10:36.